Okay, everyone who's there, welcome. I don't know who's there. I don't know if anyone's there. Anyways, welcome to 2-Month Review, our weekly podcast in which we talk about a single book, bit by bit, section by section, for a period of 2 months. This is Chad. I'm here in live with Brian, so he can actually have to pay attention to the intro for once.
Dang it.
and for the past couple months, we've been reading Georgi Gospodinov's Physics of Sorrow, which we technically, this is supposed to be our last episode for the book itself. We had one next week for conclusions, which I'll talk about later. But Brian didn't do the reading. It's like a normal book club member.
Yes, I did. I read all the way to page 275.
Which is like 2 pages away from that.
Well, I'll tell you what, with how boring your intros are, I could probably finish by the time you do all the boring stuff.
It's probably true.
Why don't you introduce our amazing guest today?
Our amazing guest is Stiliana. I'm going to screw it up. I knew I was going to do this. Milkova, who is from Oberlin College, not university. And welcome.
Thank you, Chad and Brian.
It's really good to have you on here because I know that you were very enthusiastic to come on and talk about this book. And when I went to look up your email address to make sure I had everything right to call you, I realized that we talked about this 3 years ago.
We did. I think when I reviewed it originally, I sent you the review.
Yeah.
Actually, that's why I read it. I reviewed it for this wonderful blog. It's a website, Reading and Translation. And so I contacted you because we had met a long time ago at the remind me, the translators, the Bread Loaf Translators Conference.
Which I like to call Translation Loaf. So I think that's a better name, like 100% better name.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I found. I was like, oh my God, all these pieces are coming together now. I recognize all of it. So that's cool that you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
And I know we want to talk about the book, but we were talking a minute before this started about what do you teach at Oberlin? What's your field of study?
So my field of studies, I teach comparative literature, and I'm assistant professor of comparative literature at Oberlin College. I did my PhD on 19th century Russian and Bulgarian literature, but now I teach Russian, Italian, English, a mix of other literatures, or more generally world literature.
I saw it on your bio that you had something about Russian formalist erotic poetry.
Yeah, I saw that's one of the things you mentioned, but this is from 15 years ago. It was my first graduate school paper.
It is literally, it's your Oberlin bio. It's right there. It's like, well, that's an interesting one.
It got published and everything, but I know it sounds sexy, right? So it catches attention.
Yeah,
there you go.
That's what I was, we're looking for views, man. We're looking for views. Use whatever we can get. But then I also noticed on there, which I thought was interesting, so you even mentioned it, that you're teaching Italian stuff now, is that you've been doing a lot with Elena Ferrante. I
am, yes. Yeah, I've written 5 or 6 scholarly articles on her. I've also co-translated an article by Anita Raya, who is rumored to be Elena Ferrante. I will be teaching an entire course on Elena Ferrante. So I'm definitely involved, to put it in that way, with Elena Ferrante.
How did you get involved in that, or what was your interest?
I read one of her books. I was in Italy 7 or 8 years ago, and I read one of her books, and I was hooked. I really, really liked it. So I bought all of her books that were out at that point, read them, devoured them literally, and then I've been interested in her ever since.
And you say allegedly the Elena Ferrante. Wasn't there the article in the New York Review of Books a year ago or so that? Yes. And then that's who you're referring to, right?
Yes, exactly. That supposedly uncovered her identity.
It's so funny because I remember when that came out, and I sort of read it, but not really, because I didn't really care about her identity. I read all the books.
Right, exactly.
Right? And I, to this day, don't remember what that name is.
No, I'm taking that as you're saying you don't care about her, literature, the books.
I read all of them. I read all except for...
Cut it up and start the podcast with Chad doesn't care about Elena Ferrante.
Do you have any good hot takes on the TV show that's coming?
No, I know. You've seen probably the first shots or the images of the 2 actresses. That's all I know. Supposedly Ferrante is collaborating on the script.
Oh, really? That's positive. Because it's coming up from HBO, right?
HBO, yes, exactly. And I think it's RAI, the Italian national television as well.
Exactly. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, we'll see.
So what are your initial thoughts on Physics of Sorrow? I mean, you've read it before. I don't know if you read it again.
I reread the section for today. I didn't reread the whole book, but I flipped through, you know, you learn how to skim through books. So I skimmed the book and then reread carefully the section for today.
I'm pretty sure that's like Academia 101. Like when we come like, here's how to skim through a book to get just the content you need.
Yeah, except no one really teaches you that. You have to figure it out. You know, year 2 or 3 of grad school, you realize you can't possibly read everything.
Always read the intro, and then if you need one of the chapters, look at that later.
Exactly. Or index. Index also is very important.
Well, Harold Bloom said.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a fun section. So there's technically, I guess, 3 sections to this part today, which just for anyone who's listening, we went through part 8, An Elementary Physics of Sorrow, which starts on 237, and then chapter 9, Endings, and then there's a last epilogue that's basically mirroring the prologue. And that was one of the things that struck me when I first started looking at this again, is that there's a lot of mirroring going on between the first chapter being the bread of, is it the bread of sorrow? Yeah, the bread of sorrow, and then An Elementary Physics of Sorrow, the prologue that has all the like, I was born, and this one has I was ending. And so it's kind of cool to see those things sort of play out. And this is the section that I think is my absolute favorite. Like, I really enjoy this book. I enjoy going through it. But when it all sort of kind of spiraled down into this bit that has a lot to do with both melancholy and with ideas of God and existence and death, like this really just strikes home for me. And blows me away. There's a page in here that I'll get to later that, like, if we had read this page, I don't care what the rest of the book would have been, we would publish this book.
Oh, wow. Really? Great. I want to know which one it is.
We'll get there.
Okay.
I have one quick question though. So you always get the question, people ask you, what are you reading? And I'm not sure how to tell people what I'm reading when I'm reading The Physics of Sorrow. How would you describe the book to somebody?
That's a really good question. How might I pitch it to my students, let's say?
Yeah,
well,
let's say that.
I would say, you know, it's kind of a, well, first of all, it's a semi-autobiography. So there's always that kind of intriguing aspect of it. But also I would say it kind of maps and tracks events in Eastern Europe in the last maybe 100 years. So it's kind of a history of Eastern Europe, but it's also imaginative, it's nonlinear, it's fragmentary, so it's postmodern in that way. So it might appeal to people who are interested in postmodern, nonlinear, not sort of super plot-based narrative. So that's how and I would say that it's really based also in ancient mythology, and it's kind of digging up some fundamental images from our culture and general Western culture.
Yeah, remember when we did for Rodrigo's book, for Rodrigo Farzan's Invented Part was the first season of the 2-month review, and we did a rewrite of all the jacket copy for his book.
Yes,
oh, that'd be fabulous. Exactly. I don't even know. So, yes.
I don't know what it says either. I never read these things anymore because I always feel embarrassed because I write them usually or have help writing them.
No.
And then B, also, like, I feel like they just taint my reading of everything. Like, I'm reading a different book right now for these weekly columns I've been writing, and it's like a sci-fi thing set in Japan in the future. And I'm reading it and I'm like, I don't know if this is good or not. And I think I'm leaning towards not. And then on the back, looked at the back today, it says confused over the name of a character. And it says like a hysterical, like very light and funny novel. It's like, none of this is funny. And like, now I have like a whole new problem of like, maybe I've just been misreading this entire book and like not getting it. So I always avoid.
Yeah, you don't
like,
know who. Yeah. You don't necessarily have to trust what the book jacket says.
This made me think of, it's an old movie from the 90s, but Fargo by the Coen brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And it's this weird, crazy story, but it begins with based on a true story.
Right.
Even though it never, they just invented that. They thought it sounded good to put, like, just like their trick was like, yeah, just put based on a true story and it'll wrap people in more.
That's true.
Yeah.
And I love this book because I don't know what's real and not what real, and everything blurs and kind of, I found myself just getting more immersed because I want to find out what's real or not real. And I really enjoyed the fact that it did have some autobiographical parts to it.
Right.
Yes, definitely.
The fragmentary nature is what I really like. And I guess that's really, now looking at this, that's sort of what we leaned into, was just talking about the structure of it, that it's not linear, that you can get lost on these side corridors, that it's using the myth of the Minotaur as like a principle organizing it, but that it spins out into stories that are both like sad, like the one with his grandfather being left at the mill, or like funny or whatever.
Yes.
So it's like we're describing the process of reading it and nothing about the book itself. I don't know if that's good or bad.
Well, it depends. It is a kind of architectural novel. It's an architectural text because it uses the metaphor of the rooms and corridors and of architectural structures in general, architectonics of history, but of sorrow as well. How it's mapped over different, the geography of sorrow. He traces a map of sorrow throughout all of Europe.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there's a whole section in here. Let me see if I can find it because I have it.
Jeez, just as I was having a good time, you guys got to get all smart about
okay,
architecture.
We're going to do the close reading. He's
okay. Jeez,
like,
Louise.
you can have the times all the point sections of this because either they're really good or they make me really uneasy. But there is that part about the parallels and the setup of being side corridors, and it is right. Where is I had this? I just looked through this right before I called you, and I had everything mapped out. This is where we call stuff. Okay, right here. It's on page 240. It's one of the early sections in this when he begins talking about like the nature of the story and the quanta of equivocation. There's a paragraph that's, alas, the story is linear, and you have to get rid of the detours every time, wall up the side corridors. The classical narrative is an annulling of all the possibilities that rain down on you from all sides. Before you fix its boundaries, the world is full of parallel versions and corridors. All possible outcomes potter about only in hesitation and indecisiveness. And quantum physics, filled with indeterminacy and uncertainty, has proved this. Which when I was in college, I was obsessed with like the idea of quantum physics and string theory and physics as like a sort of organizing metaphor almost, more so than the actual things. Because as much as I like math, I'm not good at it that way. Only in like the dumb baseball way. But the idea of like quantum physics and what they're sort of being proved or is proven through quantum physics or imagined was really captivating to me. And especially in terms of even literature. And he references like, has anyone ever developed a quantum physics of literature? And that was sort of like my dream as an undergrad, is to come up with some new scheme of like looking at books in that sort of light of this indecisiveness and possibilities and the observer being necessary and how that alters the way that things are. And I love all that. And that's what this section too, like really immediately was like, I feel really at home here.
You really feel
I did. I felt in every way.
Failed at that goal. That's really sad, Jack.
I know.
That makes sense why you are the way you are then. If you dreamed of this and you got to maybe here instead of here, that's going to be, there's a lot of anger when you're down here.
Yeah. There was my other dream was to figure out how to be really good at marketing books.
Oh boy!
I'll come up with some new scheme that'll revolutionize the world.
No, I wrote the top of the Heisenberg at the top of 239, right? And its impact on postmodern literature.
Yep.
Indeed, yes.
Because it was talking about the observer, correct?
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And this idea of surveillance, observation.
Yeah.
And that if we exist, that means we're being watched. So yes, exactly. That the very act of observation brings ourselves into being.
Which is another reason why I believe that we live in a simulation.
Oh, not that. What was that? Is that Derrida? The simulacra?
Baudrillard,
No. I just mean literally we are a sim.
Okay.
I don't mean
or the Matrix, another way, the Matrix, right?
Yeah, the Matrix, exactly. Like we're just like someone's playing a game and just like moving us around. There are very many times, way too many times, I'm like riding my bike and I see people doing something on the side of the street and I think human beings wouldn't do that, like unless you were a computer program. Computer program would move like that, would do that thing. And this is why I believe we're not really here.
I have the strangest ways of connecting with this novel. Like in my MFA, I was taking a class on creative nonfiction, and I wanted a way of, and I'd been doing a course on postmodernism as well, so I wanted to do a postmodern nonfiction. And so I did one where I traveled back in time and saw myself as an adult in different back as a child in different situations.
Yeah.
And the workshop on that piece, I got eviscerated by everybody. Like, you're not allowed to do that because how is this nonfiction if you're time traveling? You can't do that. Like, I'm like, well, what the hell is memory? Like, what do you mean I can't do this?
Yeah.
And I loved reading like him doing this. I was like, that's what I wanted to do, and I wasn't allowed to do it.
And he's like, those rules don't
matter. And he does it so effortlessly, and I'm on board with it. And I had such a connection with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's breaking so many rules.
Yes. Yeah. In fact, that quote that Chad read on, was it 240? That it describes the very novel, the novel itself. It says, it's nonlinear and it's refusing to wall up the side corridors, and it's blurring boundaries rather than fixing them. So there is that wonderful moment of meta reflexivity. So
yeah, he really
part
does
of the postmodern poetics of this text, of course.
Absolutely, and not to like hammer home that one section too much, but it is that paragraph that's really like life affirming or book affirming. Is I try to leave space for other versions to happen, cavities in the story, more corridors, voices in rooms, unclosed off stories, as well as secrets that we will not pry into. And there, where the story's sin was not avoided, hopefully uncertainty was with us, which is a great affirmation of this book as a whole and like his ability to pull this off.
Yes, absolutely.
Unless our hands, this would not work, but you have a whole universe written in your book.
Yeah. No, I wrote that next to the on page 243 it says, thus I was born on January 1st, 1968, will be able to die again on January 1st, 1968. That's what I call complete universal harmony, to die the hour and minute you were born, after passing through your whole life twice, from one end to the other and back again. Yeah. Boom.
Yeah, what page are you on, Brian? What page are you on?
243.
Okay, 243. I went to 253. Okay.
The muscaline I had taken, it was wearing off as I was reading that. So I was in this weird state. But no, it made me think of the singularity of a Big Bang. And then they're supposed to say everything's shrinking back.
And collapses.
And collapsed within to itself. And then if you're looking at, basically the entire existence of everything is just really just a flash, even though it is an infinite amount of time. It's weird stuff to think about.
It's like that True Detective line, time is a circle.
Time is a flat circle.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Now, so I'm bringing my dumb, like, half drunken ideas to this. Like, what were some of your thoughts on this weird? This is a weird section. I can't make sense of it.
The whole section?
Yeah, I mean, just so what did you think of everything and everything in it? I feel like that guy on Saturday Night Live that has questions about, so how does this movie compare to every movie ever?
Yes, indeed. Okay, so I have, by the way, I have the Bulgarian edition with me. Just I thought.
That's fantastic.
Show it.
That's fantastic.
Yes, I've been doing some comparative reading. Bulgarian and English.
Can I ask you one question for the Bulgarian to English?
Yes.
Page in the English version is page 246.
Okay.
And it has the list.
Yes.
And number 5 on the list is foot wraps of unbleached calico.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, that was a little odd. I remember.
I mean, it has socks. It says socks in parentheses, but I just love the.
Because the Bulgarian is Partenkiot American, and in parentheses churapi. So American is a kind of cloth. Partenki, I have no idea. I think it must be some sort of footwear or. Yeah, so I don't know, but it's definitely an antiquated word.
Yeah,
and the whole list looks. And if it looks like it's been reproduced almost exactly from a photograph, or
I remember seeing that because we I don't know if we had the copy of the book per se, but we probably had like the PDF to check the layout on stuff.
Yes,
usually we try and do.
Oh, that's so awesome! You can go back and forth to both of them.
Yeah, that's got to be interesting. Have you? Is there anything about that you've noticed, or like that you're gonna give Angela props for, or that? I
think she's done an amazing job, a phenomenal job, really. I mean, I cannot imagine the kind of hard work, intellectual, linguistic that goes into it goes into translation by default, but this particular book, because it's so fragmentary, because it's so grounded in politics, in sociology, in all sorts of ideological language, it's, you know, it's been, I think she did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, I mean, there's so much trust when you start reading one of her translations where, you know, she knows what she's doing. She's thought about it. There are difficulties with every book and things that you can quibble over eventually and whatever. But like she instills such an amount of trust and belief in what she's doing, and you feel her ability to write this and to render it, to understand what's going on, and to make it work in English in a way that's like just as evocative as probably the original.
Yes, absolutely. I really admire her as a translator, and I think she does a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to go back for 1 second to that section you were talking about, Brian, with the living forward and then back. And this is for people who are longtime listeners.
Which, hold on, before going forward and back, the title of my essay was Adventures in Space-Time.
Oh, nice.
And so I got completely eviscerated. Look, I was on top of this shit, man. This was 2011. I had it. And I got told, no, you can't do it. Fuck them, dude. Fuck that. Sorry, go ahead.
The God is a boson part, and the part where he writes, a while back under one of my pen names, I published a novel based on the atomism of Leucippus, of Miletus, and the Democritus of Abdera. I screwed it up.
Yeah, was that real?
This, I don't know. I couldn't find it.
Okay.
But this is basically Freisan's book. This ties in an invented part, like almost exactly. Like with the idea of the atomism and the atomic novel of opening lines floating in the void. Like that sounds just like something out of the invented part. Like if you lifted that there, I totally believe in it. And there's like, this was a wholly serious experiment, but it was taken more as a postmodern joke, grasped in terms of its metaphorics rather than its physics. Physicists don't read novels, which disappointed me greatly and caused me to withdraw from publishing for a decade or so. And that sounds exactly like you could see that paragraph in the invented part, and it would make sense still.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or like a variation on it, but.
So I have a question for you. If you were going to teach this book, and I don't know what the course would be called or whatever, but what would you want your students to get out of a book like this? How would you approach it with them?
You know, I'd probably have to teach them quite a bit about Eastern European history, 20th century Eastern European history, even, you know, some more recent European history and Eastern European history in particular. A little bit about mythology. You'd be surprised, or maybe you already know, that American students, undergraduates, don't have a foundation in Western literature and the classics of Western literature. So I'd probably have to teach them a little bit about mythology and ancient Greek mythology, but also there are recurring themes.
But in particular, would you focus on like late socialism or just the general, like, this is where Bulgaria is on a map? Like, would it be?
Yeah, I'd probably start there. Absolutely.
Yeah.
When people ask me where I'm from and I say Bulgaria, they're not always sure where that is. So I have to specify, well, it's in Eastern Europe. Well, where's that? So,
like Germany?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man.
No, you know, I don't know how I would teach it. Believe it or not, I might teach it in a course on, and if that studies mythology in contemporary, modern and contemporary literature, because it's structured around the Minotaur, and this foundational myth of the Minotaur is kind of the thread that runs through the entire text, right? It gives it structure, it gives it the narrative, it gives it the imagery, and then all of these, the kind of versions of the Minotaur, from the cow to the gas mask, to the little boy, to Theseus, to the way that the narrator and is conflated with the Minotaur. And so I think I might teach this in a course on mythology in modern and contemporary literature.
I was just asking selfishly because I'm doing some teaching and writing, not necessarily with reading of text, but I always look at things of how would I use this as a teaching tool. And this just seems so challenging because there's, like you said, so many different parts and echoes, and I mean, pick your poison on this, and you can.
Yes.
Because there's
so many ways long. You know, it is long for undergraduates to read. Honestly,
dude, don't say things like that. I think my undergraduates listen to this, and that's bullshit. You're supposed to read 500-page books every week, and they should never complain again. Because that's how it is, right? right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
see?
I think you're absolutely right. Yes.
But I don't teach the books that we use in this class in the way that you're talking about, because the way that you're talking about it would be legitimate, like teaching of the book. We use it more like the intro to the idea of how things are translated and a general like survey of like contemporary literature and how different options that exist and how it's written and how it's like how their different aesthetic ideas can come about throughout the world and connect to one another, even if like their languages are completely different. So it's like a totally different approach where you have to have like a shitload of text and less like of the close reading, because otherwise it's like the distant reading of Franco Moretti sort of idea of like, we have to look at the whole scheme. Otherwise it's hard for them to talk about certain aspects of like world trends, because like you say, they haven't read many things. And that's, I don't know whose fault that is, just as a thing.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I did teach excerpts of another foundational Bulgarian text, actually, late 19th century text by Ganyu. I did teach in my literary translation workshop.
Nice.
And we only read a couple of chapters, but that's fundamentally, how do you translate a text that's so, well, remote in time, but also culturally specific? Do you put footnotes? Do you gloss? What do you do? And so definitely, I mean, I can see how you can teach this text in a translation course.
Right. Exactly, yeah. I'm just trying to defend my forcing students to read like so much.
There is no defense for that. Because there are very good 50,000 word texts that you could be choosing.
They weren't published last year.
And that's a wonderful form. How many words were Fever Dream?
Hey, I think
that was maybe 25,000 words. You could have given Fever Dream; it would have loved you.
I will withhold my snarky comment. No, so I have a question. What do you? Okay, we could jump ahead. There's a parts of this that like I like talking about the time thing, and I need to talk about my favorite page at some point.
Yes.
But you mentioned the idea of the Minotaur sort of merging with him, and that idea. What do you make of this? The ending exactly, like especially on page 276 and 77, where it says like a short double-edged sword is found, in all likelihood an unusually valuable object from antiquity. And then there's like, I felt the strange sort of excitement. I had a complicated relationship with that writer without having known him. I had always felt personally robbed while reading him. And before that, there's a bit where he's like in the basement talking about how someone's going to kill him. And it is like sort of this merging of those two things. But I'm curious of what you make out of it, because I'm not sure that there's like a distinctive, I mean, it's very quantum ending, I suppose, where possibilities of how you could read and observe it.
Yeah, I mean, the way I read it is that, well, the narrator and the Minotaur have become one, or in any case, I think the narrator is similar to Theseus, who finds the Minotaur, but it turns out that Theseus is very similar to the Minotaur, and the Minotaur says that Theseus reminds him of himself. So there's convergence of the three voices, and so these narrative threads come together, and they continue on in another universe. You know, it's like they're missing, they're gone, right? The scene of the crime is there. There is no actual crime. There's no blood on this double-edged sword.
Right.
It's only the sign of kind of the material sign of their existence. But I think they've continued on in another story. So I think that's kind of, they've invented another story, and they're inhabiting another story, another corridor, another building. So I think they've changed location.
Yeah, I could totally buy into that. That, or like it goes backwards then too.
It goes backwards. That's right, exactly. Because that's another recurring theme, right? Going backwards in time and getting younger and younger and reliving your birth.
The part about nostalgia is God. There are so many parts of this that really are right in my wheelhouse. The nostalgia part about recreating like the Bulgarian city of 30 years ago and having it like be that thing, because people are nostalgic nowadays. They want to go back. Really struck home too, especially in light of a different thing that I've obsessed with, which was the most recent Twin Peaks show. I did it.
No.
I was holding it inside until right now. I gave you a whole season with no Twin Peaks references. And finally I get my one. But the whole show is, a lot of that show is structured around the idea
I'm gonna go make a drink. Go ahead. Talk about Twin Peaks.
He's actually gone. For people who are living to listen to podcasts, he's gone. But there is idea in that season, or the new season of Twin Peaks, about like as a creator trying to have nostalgia, how to return to something, how to deal with this sort of obsession with nostalgia when you can't really ever go back and you can't capture that, and how do you interact with it. And there is a little, it's not exactly the same, but it reminds me of that. Like now that that I've watched that show, which I think is the best thing I've ever seen. It's just amazing anytime that nostalgia comes up, I have like a more complicated relationship to the idea of nostalgia than I did prior to watching it. And even within this, I have the same kind of feeling of like, there's so many more layers to this base kind of primal idea. It's not easy enough to reject, and it's not easy to like go down that rabbit hole of just like wanting things to be like the past because they can't.
Yes, in fact, the living museum of socialism is fascinating. The whole city, which relives and reenacts socialism and communism. It's really interesting.
She said her favorite show is Twin Peaks too.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Yeah, that's what we've been talking about.
Changed everything. Forget like the fall of socialism and a whole new regime coming in.
Yeah.
Twin Peaks. It's everything.
You know, book could actually just be part of the Twin Peaks.
Yeah, well, speaking, they're shooting a film, or the narrator thinks they're shooting a film anyway. So there you go.
Yeah, and that's part of like the Audrey theme of the most recent series. I'm done.
I have not seen it. I have not seen that season, I admit.
Greatest thing I've ever seen. So I do want to point out one thing for sure is that I think next week Santiago has been writing the weekly post about this for the website, is going to come on to talk about writing about it and reading it and his process of working on this particular project for us. And one of the things that he honed in on very early was that the whole book is set up as kind of a spiral, and he was obsessed with the idea of the spiral within the narrative as well. And of course, on 268, there's a whole thing of like a vertical labyrinth that unwinds in a spiral and talking about DNA and labyrinths. So really like what feeds right into his sort of interpretation. I just want to give him a little shout out on the podcast and tell people you should be reading those things that he's writing. They're great. His weekly posts, and he will be on here to talk about them as well.
And now that I think about it, on Twin Peaks, that box that they bury the girl in is kind of like a time capsule.
It's kind of
right, and he jumps on the time capsule to try to stop it from being buried because he's trying to stop time.
Yeah.
So maybe
in the last episode of the most recent season, they go back in time and fix everything.
You know what? Twin Peaks is everything. You're right. You're right.
There are lots of people chiming in about Twin Peaks on the chat right now, and they're all talking about how it's the greatest thing ever.
It's merely just that I don't have anything against Twin Peaks. I just haven't seen it, so I have to.
So, do you want to know what my favorite one is? My favorite page?
Yes, we're dying, Chad.
Yes.
Sure. I'll make this album my favorite page. It's the Quanta of Aging on 251. This is 100% like the page that means the most to me. Because it has it's been about getting old, but there's the two paragraphs in particular that are right in the middle. There's some sort of grammar for aging. Childhood and youth are full of verbs. You can't sit still. Everything in you is growing, gushing forth, developing. Later, the verbs are gradually replaced by the nouns of middle age. Kids, cars, work, family, the substantial things of the substantives. Growing old is an adjective. We enter into the adjectives of old age: slow, boundless, hazy, cold, or transparent like glass. Amazing. And then there's the mathematics of aging, a simple set theory. We change the world's proportions over the years. Those younger than we are grow ever more numerous, while the number of those older than we are declines menacingly. Aging requires a certain audacity. It may not be audacity, but resignation. Those two paragraphs alone, like if I read that on an opening of any submission to us, I'd be like, yeah, we're going to publish this book. We'll figure out the rest of it later. Don't care. I love those two paragraphs.
Great. I hope some of my students are watching. This is a good lesson for them.
Now they know what to foreground.
Yes, exactly.
If you're talking to a middle-aged white male who's an editor, talk about getting old and feeling like you're gonna die. That'll really feel good to them.
And have an interesting failing marriage in your plot.
Yes.
Can't lose.
Make sure it feels like they're like bound by the scriptures of time and society.
Yes, mixing literature and science, right? That's quantum physics and literature. It's a good combination.
I think that's a fun way of talking about, because I mean, there's only so many ways that you can talk about getting old and like the process of that and the feelings. But this idea of using grammar in that way, I hadn't seen before, and I really like that. Like,
yes,
there is that sort of, it sort of makes sense, even if obviously it's sort of making that up, but it still works really well for me.
Yes, no, for sure. And it's something that you can really relate to, regardless of what culture you come from.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's very universal.
Yeah, absolutely. There's that relates to the part like a few pages earlier on 241 where he talks about like his great moment is like sitting on the steps before anything's happened, and like that sort of possibilities of the future.
Exactly. Yes, with the girl who's sitting with her back towards him at the piano. I think that's my favorite image from that novel. Yeah. And at the end, as she turns around and he recognizes her, it's really wonderful. For me, it really is a kind of the highlight or the epiphany at the end of the text.
It's so good.
It is. It's really good. Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Is that similar? And how does that work in Bulgarian? Is it verbs, adjectives, nouns? It probably is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It is the same. Yes. Oh, it's yes, very good.
A funny real world connection I had in this section is on page 245. It starts with ellipses, and it says, "But in the end, you don't do it."
Yes.
And then it talks about having to go to the barber shop and have all your hair cut off, and you're watching it falling to the floor, and you're crying. So I was at I think it was 2010 AWP in Chicago, and I watched Carol Maso give a reading. Super packed house. There was like 600 people there, and she was reading these very small short stories, maybe 2,000 words or less. And one of the short stories she read was about a soldier that was getting his hair cut. And she was talking about the hair falling off of the soldier and then linking it to soldiers dying and things falling to the floor. And then the soldier, the young cadet, kind of like weeping. And then when she finished, I just remember when she finished the story, you know, it's a room of like 600 people, this big auditorium, and it's just completely silent. And like nobody says anything. And you just hear somebody go, "Fuck." And the whole place just like erupted in like clapping and like whooping, like what a good story. And this paragraph is exactly the same image, the same thing she conjured up. Like I just love that people completely different from completely walks of life can have such a powerful, impactful image. Like it reminded me of what a treat it was to sit in that audience and hear this wonderful reading that she gave. And then here I just got goosebumps reading about the hair falling down, the tears, and so wonderful that just human beings, man, we're all human. I love it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's also empathy, right?
Yes, it's empathy.
And the whole this book is about empathy, which is also the art of the novelist in general. The art of the writer is to create that sensation in the reader.
Correct.
Yeah. And it's so fun how he plays around with that idea throughout, where it starts out almost as if empathy is like a magical sci-fi ability for him to go into people's worlds and embed himself. And like then it becomes like that's a psychology of empathy. Oh yeah, you found the perfect quote. But then then it sort of evolves into like he can no longer embed, but he can write these things and can empathize through people in that way. And that the book makes that possible. It kind of, I mean, it's another one of these, like, it's a testament to the idea of writing. Like if you can write well and you can write a book that can change things for people because it allows you to have this experience. Yes. It's a physics book, right? So which section, you read it?
Oh, sure. Page 249 at the very bottom, it says, "Empathy is unlocked in some people through pain. For me, it happens more often through sorrow."
Yes.
I kind of get that. Like,
exactly.
Well, it's the connection with the Minotaur throughout everything, right? He's always looking at trying to look at through the Minotaur's eyes, not Theseus's eyes, right?
And you can think of the Minotaur as the other, right? This kind of a generalized figure of the other, but the writer inhabits the other as well. So I really like that he's looking through kind of this, through the eyes or through the perspective of an ostracized other who is different, inherently different.
Yeah. Someone growing up in United States, I love the idea of they always identified with the Indians and not with the cowboys. That was a wonderful, like, you should have empathy for them. These are people that have been, like, but no, in our movies, they're the bad guys, right? It's the cowboys are the good guys. Go kill them. Like, and
that was a great.
Yes.
That idea of empathy and thinking of the other, it's the different parallels he does on that. I was really impressed with all throughout this book.
Yes.
Are there other Bulgarian books that like lead into this from your perspective, of like from an aesthetic standpoint, or just generally speaking? Like, this seems so out of nowhere in terms of like, I mean, it's so impressive. It's such an interesting concept. It's a great way of doing it. And the other Bulgarian literature I've read, I really like.
Wait, it's out of nowhere because Bulgarians can't write good literature? Is that what you're saying?
No, in the sense that
that's what you just said.
The other Bulgarian books that I've read and that we published.
That's really mean, Chad.
are not like this.
I apologize for him.
Did you recently published Wolf Hunt? Is that right?
No, we read it.
Oh, you read it.
I made my class read that. Yeah, they read that whole book, and then we talked to Angela, and she explained to them like, because that book's history is, I mean, the structure of how it's written is crazy because he wrote it in 2 different times, and so there's like one part of it, and then there's a second part that he inserted that was like more of the anti-communist part, and he kept telling like the communist government, he's like, oh, there's going to be a part that's coming later that's like pro-communist, don't worry. But but like the book, there's a lot of things that just don't make sense in terms of plot, and there's structural problems because he wrote it in this weird sort of way. It's a book that has like an engine on page like 21 that never pays off. It's this very strange book. But I made my students read that. It's like fucking 600 pages long. Like, I don't know why anyone takes my classes. Like,
do you guys look at the Rate My Professor? Is that thing still out? The ratemyprofessor.com?
I think
I'm sure they have evaluations, right?
No,
I heard the evaluations.
There was like a Hot or Not website for professors when I was in, this is like back in like 2003 or something, but there used to be like a ratemyprofessor.com.
There is, yeah. Oh yeah.
He gets 2 blood fists, not 5. Or you would get 0 for making people read 600-page Bulgarian text.
I think I reach on easiness in there.
What's wrong with you?
They enjoyed it, man. They loved that book. They actually did love that book.
Okay, well, that's good then.
You give me good books. It's a good book. But is there anything else that like
I'm going to admit some of my own ignorance. I haven't really kept up. I wish I had kept up with contemporary Bulgarian literature, but I, read once in a while something recommended. So I read this book because it was such a sensation in Bulgaria and was very popular. But I don't know where it's coming from in terms of contemporary influences, but I think some parts of it evoke some older Bulgarian narratives, early 20th century. I would say Jordan Yovkov is one of the authors I thought of. He's primarily famous for his short stories, which track kind of the Bulgarian 19th century past in this semi-mythological, semi-folklore way, but really beautifully written, but they have these settings in small towns or villages. And he's pretty well known in Bulgaria. So I detect some of that in Gospodinov's writing, but I'm not sure what, I mean, other than the Western European, right? You can think of a number of Western European influences, but I'm not sure what particularly Bulgarian literary kind of impact I can detect here, other than early 20th century, some of the classics, the Bulgarian classics.
And it's kind of cool to think of it not being necessarily influenced by other Bulgarian authors, but like from Western European traditions and bringing that into Bulgaria and importing that and transforming it as he's writing it. But I really, I mean, we've published, I don't know, I think it's 8 Bulgarian books now, maybe it's 7, 6, but it's a number, and like they're all really fantastic, but they're all very different. And like there's a sense of like being and this is true not just of Bulgaria, but of other countries, especially in Eastern Europe, but throughout the world, of being somewhat outside or adjacent to the tradition that we're used to in America. So it's like, it's kind of there, but like different. It's just different and a different take. Like there's one of the books, Milan Ruskov's Thrown into Nature, is picaresque that has like sort of Don Quixote-like ideas behind it, but it's also like just kind of batshit and like very funny and like just irreverent, and like the whole idea is that this guy's going around, this doctor is going around and convincing everyone they need to use smoke for everything. The smoking kills all ills. That you have to have a smoke enema will make you better forever. You can cure cancer with smoke. Like all this, and it's really wild and like irreverent. And
I've been doing a cigarette juice cleanse.
There you go. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I feel awful. But I'm getting better. I'll get better, but I feel awful right now.
But it's fun. It's like taking these ideas and like seeing it through new
very
lens.
brittle fingernails.
And yellow. Everything's yellow. your skin turns a certain tone.
Yeah, I think also, but they're also, I would say, not just Western European, but Eastern European and Balkan influences. I'm thinking Milorad Pavic, Dictionary of the Khazars. I don't know if you've read, and you probably have Thea Albrecht's The Tiger's Wife, which has a similar theme to it. So Danilo Kish and I think there's a lot of Eastern European and Central European or even Balkan influences here. So it's a little bit of a pastiche, and I think he's going for it. This is the kind of fragmentary mixing of genres, mixing of images, words with pictures, etc., etc. So I think he's going for it.
Oh yeah, it's spectacular.
It is, it is.
There's no one like that. I like how our comparisons on the back, because we want to throw in some names so that you get keywords.
So lame.
Dave Eggers, Tom McCarthy, and Dubravka Ugreshik. Although Ugreshik is really spot on.
That works.
Oh yeah, of course. That is absolutely, you're right. That's, yes.
But Dave Eggers and Tom McCarthy and Gospodinov were all finalists for the same prize.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, wow, yes.
Yeah, and I don't remember who won, but I think this book won over the other ones. But they were all like... It was the which one called the Strego Prize.
Oh really? No, I don't.
I don't think it did either. I think it was just a finalist.
He was nominated, and there are only 5 finalists. So
yeah, they can be from anything. They can be from any language translated into Italian. So
yes, exactly. Yes, and in fact, they just today announced the 2017 shortlist of the Premio Strega Europeo.
Who's on it? Anyone?
There's, I think, I remember reading it briefly. There is an Irish novel. I think there is, I can't remember now. I can look it up, but.
Yeah.
It doesn't, yes, but they just announced it today, the finalists.
We're announcing the whole Best Translated Book Award long list. If you're watching this on YouTube, we're announcing it tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. If you're listening to this on the podcast, it's already been announced and you can find it. But I'm not giving you guys any answers to who's on it.
They probably don't care.
They probably don't. No,
yeah,
a lot of people do care. We used to have a competition where if you could guess, and I screwed it up because we didn't get the list until late, and it's been busy times. But if you could guess all 25 books on the long list, you received every open letter book until you died, or the person out of business. Wow. Like it was a game. So this time we'll have to do it for a short list that you'll get like X number of years.
For 2017.
Yeah.
Let's see, Baghdad Frankenstein monster thing.
That's a 2018 book, man. I wrote a whole post based on how people misunderstood.
Sorry, no books for life for me. The Perfect Nanny.
Also 2018.
I'm just so current. I'm so current. What can I say? I don't know. The Bible. They're always translating that every year. It gets translated.
True. Anyways, is there any other section that you guys wanted to talk about in here that?
No, what I think most impresses me with this is the ability to somehow infuse humor throughout all of this.
It really, yeah. It's
like just to do that in any form is very hard to do, and then to pull it off in this it's a magic trick. So I love that it starts off with a magic trick because that's its own magic trick. It seems like to be funny throughout all this. I
was planning on taking a class over at Writers and Books to learn how to be humorous. Yeah. Like how to write humor into my writing.
Like I laughed when I read the line on 254. I can't stand categorical people. When like, the whole thing, he's making lists and categories and right, but that's when he was 29, I guess. So he learned to grow up from that, I guess. I don't know.
I forget. This is one of my favorite sections too, with all the ages after each little bit and like what you'd be at that.
So you were talking about smoking, right? Yes. Funny version. Yeah. A guy decides to quit smoking using regressive hypnotherapy. He starts going backward towards the time before he started smoking to awaken the memory of his clean lungs. The hypnotherapy is so successful that the regression goes so far back that he not only quits smoking, but he also starts wetting his bed and not being able to say R.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. My apologies.
No, you didn't. I don't know. I was just agreeing. But, it's funny that I don't find it as funny. I mean, I think it's because it's too close to home that I really empathize. That to me, that's part of my own past, of my own history. Sure. And even though, just like Gospodinov, biographical person, and like the literary character here, I grew up in communist society in the 80s, about a decade after the narrator here, but still I have distinct memories of everything that he's describing, and they're the memories of a child, but still. So to me, I identify with the character, and so I don't find it that funny. I think it's dead serious. But I can see your point of view completely. It's just that how our own background, our own history informs the way we read and the way we relate to a text.
There's also maybe not funny, but there's not a lightness is probably the wrong word too, but there's an energy or a verve to the writing that takes it out of being just dead on the page serious. You know what I mean? Like it might not be funny, but it's like it's not that. There are books that are describing the time period in pseudo historical ways that are playful, like not
right.
Playful.
It's playful.
Right.
I think it's playful. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's
I love that about the book.
Right.
And that's what for me makes it bearable, because then it would be like you said, if it were a dead serious history of the period, would be boring and would be just painful to read.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. The one that I
have favorite other quotes. The labyrinth is really, I love the labyrinth. Yes, the internal labyrinths. You know, the bodies. We're made of labyrinths, right? The corporeal labyrinths.
Yes. Love that.
The part with the cardiac exam was the part where I was just like, oh no, that's a little close to home. I'm gonna make me uncomfortable.
Oh.
And then immediately after, it's describing like not being able to hear out of the ear, and I was like, why are you doing this to me?
My favorite part about the labyrinth of the guts and stuff, my wife does surgery, and I asked her, like, how do you guys know how to put people's insides back in? And she's like, oh, it's easy. You just put them back in. They know where to go. Like,
pre-folded like a map.
No, because like I always thought, like, you know, like the intestines, like, how do you, is there like a
arrange them, right?
Like, how do you, like, no, just put them in and they'll go where they go. They know where to go.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
There's one moment, a wonderful cultural moment on page 270, top of 270, where he talks about the food, the sweets, the pastries, baniti, burek, saradias, all the winding phyllo dough sweets of the Orient. And that in particular is kind of a very vibrant image to me, because I can picture the winding in banita, which is the phyllo dough pie, and then the kind of the sweet and savory food. Bulgarian, but also Mediterranean. It's again, I mean, I had never thought of it as a labyrinth, but even when you look at it, when you cut it, it looks like a labyrinth. It has walls and corridors, and you can get lost in it, like just trying to fish out the cheese. And so that's a really beautiful image to me.
And are the sweets sweetened with honey, I assume, because it goes straight to bees from there?
No, well, maybe he doesn't say baklava. Baklava is traditionally made with honey in Bulgaria, so no. But saradia, I think, could be made with honey, sugar. But that's a good point. Absolutely. Then he goes to beets.
Yeah, I hate reading stuff that's written by somebody that's smart, because you got to really kind of consider everything and where it's arranged. the hyper.
You know, I was curious. I admit, here's a teaching moment. So I was really curious whether it's Angela glossing the 3 words in italics, because these are such Bulgarian concepts. So I was wondering if the following line were a stealth gloss on her part, and in fact, it's not. It's in the Bulgarian that he modifies, he qualifies, and so it's really, it could have been a stealth gloss, but it's not.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it would seem like it could go either way. You're right.
Yes, exactly. Because otherwise, you don't know what these words are. They're foreign words. They're foreign concepts, but nothing else. Without the following line, you wouldn't know what they are.
Yeah,
that's very true. Yeah, and just be like, oh, that's another one of these italicized words. It's funny. I have to teach tomorrow. We're going over Compass by Matthias Enard, which is all about the Orient and about this kind of being both attracted to and obsessed with and encountering the other. So it ties in nicely to this book at the end. And the guy's dying in bed. It's all these things. Everything in this book seems to be one of these books that like hits on the rest of your life as you read it. like, which doesn't
exactly
always happen, but it's part of the structure of this. And also Compass has the same thing with images throughout it. It has a lot of images that show up it's usually things that are from books, or that are representations of Arabic culture. But nevertheless, it's like another book with images that has this sort of understanding. Like, it's interesting to me that I'm reading this and having all these other things happen around it. That's what it's at.
Yes,
and most importantly, LitHub said they like the cover of it. So
that cover is shit, dude. That cover is shit.
How did you come up with this cover? So it's beautiful. I really like it. Why did you pick yellow?
It was literally. I don't remember why yellow, except usually if there's too many books that are red or blue that are in that given season, we try and variate them. But the yellow seemed to work really well. But the idea was to make it look like a minotaur, but also fragmented. Those are the two things. And so Nate took that pretty literally, I guess, and took a minotaur and fragmented it, because we found pictures of minotaurs that you could play around with, right? And there is a different version of this that, for whatever reason, showed up online last week, out of nowhere. It showed up everywhere in Amazon and on our distributors page, and it was not our original. It's not this cover. It was the earlier version. It was never released to the public, but it was everything's way more spaced out. The text is in different places, and it just suddenly resurfaced. And apparently, from the chat room, Kaya is informing me that the reason we chose yellow is because yellow equals nostalgia.
Yes, I was going to say it really kind of recalls melancholy.
Yeah. That's why she's the brains of the operation.
Yeah, Chad.
That's right. I'm like, oh, dude, it was a picture of a minotaur, and I don't know, yellow's cool. It's no, it's fucking nostalgia. Jesus Christ. Who is keeping this press on the rails? Not me. Do you have a favorite line, Brian?
There were a lot from here, but I'm going to go way back, not in this section, to page 216.
Okay.
And if we go way back to page 216, he says at the top paragraph there, before I left, she gave me her favorite dinosaur. I've always kept it with me. I imagine how someday in the future, when she is telling stories to her own children, she'll start with the line, "My father and the dinosaurs disappeared at the same time," which is a good beginning, or rather, end.
There you go.
Which then,
yes,
and at the very, 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 very end, we got a cute little dinosaur here.
That's a dinosaur,
right? And the line beginning, "My father and the dinosaurs died out at the same time." If you want to read this book, you got to be very careful and pay attention to stuff, because he doesn't throw stuff in here for nothing.
Yeah, seems haphazard, and it's definitely not haphazard.
It's very, I know this term is probably not quite relevant, but it's very tightly plotted. For as fragmentary as it seems, it's very tightly plotted and structured.
It is. Yes.
Yeah, and then also it gives voice to the daughter. It's the daughter who begins the next narrative at the end. So she's the voice of the future. She's the next storyteller.
Absolutely.
And of course, children are minotaurs as well. And so maybe this is the new minotaur too.
And it could be.
It's the first time as a child that
it could be some hope, because children are maligned, and children's not a happy thing throughout most of this until we get to his own child.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't even have. I've read all my favorite lines, so I'm not even going to use one this time, unless there's "We are labyrinths." We are made of labyrinths. Sorry, that's what it is.
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's great.
So, thank you. And I will for everyone who's listening, we will be having one more episode about this. It's just to talk to Santiago about his writings and about the book one last time. We'll see if Georgi will come on for a minute too. I'm not sure if he will or not. We'll see if he can come on here and chat with us as well. And then after that, we'll be announcing the next season of the 2-month review, which will focus on Fox by Dubravka Ugrashik. You can order it now, and if you use the code 2month, you'll get 20% off from our website. And that goes for all of the books that have been in the 2-month review so far. So Physics of Sorrow, Death in Spring, Selected Stories of Mercy Rodoreda, Thomas Johnson bestseller, and The Invented Part, all 20% off if you just use the code 2, the number 2, and then month. And then after that, we'll be changing things up, but we'll save that announcement for a later date. But as always, you can always check in at 3%. You can sign up for our newsletter. You can get all of the information there. You can also follow us on Twitter at open_letter or at Chad W Post. That's way easier to remember. And at Brian Wood _. Do you use Twitter?
I don't.
Okay, I couldn't find you on there.
No.
But where can people find what you're doing? Or if they want to...
Either Facebook or academia.edu or just Oberlin's webpage.
Oberlin's webpage just talks about the Russian formalist erotic poetry.
Well, maybe they haven't updated, and who knows?
She's got a killer score on ratemyprofessor.com, so she's doing a good job teaching, I'll tell you that.
Watch out, watch out.
Her students love her.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for doing this.
Thank you, Chad and Brian. It was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me.
For sure. Any last words of labyrinths or minotaurs?
It's ending. The novel ends with a late April snow, just as we are in mid-April, and it was snowing in Ohio earlier today. So we're kind of at the end of the novel, and we're in April, and it's still snowing.
That's kind of fitting. Prince died in April, and he has a song, Sometimes It Snows in April.
Is that true?
Yes, big sigh.
Rest in peace.
65 degrees on Thursday, guys. 65 degrees.